So in this video, we're going to talk about intercepts. Now, there are two kinds of intercepts, right? The first one is what we call an x-intercept. Okay, so what's an x-intercept? An x-intercept is a point where the curve or the graph crosses or touches the x-axis. Okay, and similarly, we have something called a y-intercept. Okay, and just like your x-intercept, the y-intercept is where the curve either crosses or touches the y-axis. So the y-intercept is a point where the curve crosses or touches the y-axis. Okay. So for example, let's say I have a curve that goes something like this. Okay, so these are my axes here. And let's say I have a curve that goes this way. All right. So then this is obviously this is my x-axis. This is my y-axis. So I have a point here. So these are going to be my x-intercepts. And this blue dot over here, that's going to be my y-intercept, right? So these two here, this is my x-intercept. This is also my x-intercept. And this one here is going to be the y-intercept. Okay. So let's take a closer look at the x-intercept, right? So suppose this point was, say, x1. And its y-coordinate, since it's on the x-axis, y-coordinate is going to be 0. Same way here, I'm going to have, say, x2, 0. Right? So what do we notice? We notice that if you take any of the x-intercepts, its y-coordinate is always going to be 0. Right? So that's how we can figure out whether a point is an x-intercept or not. If its y-coordinate is 0, then it's going to end up being on the x-axis, and if the curve passes through that point, then that's going to be an x-intercept for the curve. Similarly, if we look at this point, let's call that point 0, y1, right? What do we notice here? Actually, pick any point on the y-axis. What do we notice? We notice that the x-coordinate is going to be 0, right? And so we just have the y-coordinate here. So again, if we see a point of the form 0, a or 0, b, we know that that point is going to be on the y-axis. And if the curve passes through that point, then that's going to become the y-intercept for the curve. So if you remember, like I said, for x-intercept, your y-coordinate is always going to be 0. So, right, so for an x-intercept, right, the y-coordinate is always 0. So to find the x-intercept, what we do is, since we know this, we set y equal to 0, okay, and we solve the equation for x. All right. So same way for a y-intercept, when we saw in the previous slide, in the y-intercept, the x-coordinate is always 0. So for a y-intercept, the x-coordinate is always 0. So to find the y-intercept, right, we set x equal to 0 and we solve the equation for y. Okay, so let's take an example. Find the intercepts of the equation y equals x squared plus x squared minus 5x plus 6. All right, like we saw, we have two intercepts. So let's go ahead and find the x-intercept first. So x-intercept. Okay, so what do you do? So set y equal to 0 and solve for x. Okay, so if I set y equal to 0, I'm going to get x squared minus 5x plus 6 equal to 0. How do we solve this? I'm going to give you a quick second to think about how we're going to solve this. So I'm guessing you guys have figured this out, but we'll have to factor this quadratic expression. And if we factor it, we're going to get x minus 3 times x minus 2 equals 0. All right. Now, how does that help us? Well, we know this fact. We know that if a times b equal to 0, then either a equal to 0 or b equal to 0, right? Which means x minus 3 equal to 0 or x minus 2 is equal to 0. Okay, so if I solve here, I'm going to add 3 on both sides. I get x equal to 3 or I get x equals 2. So I have two intercepts. I have x equals 3 and x equals 2. But we need to write these in terms of their coordinates, right, as a coordinate point. And so my x-intercepts, I have two x-intercepts. Remember, the y-coordinate is always 0. So in this case, I have 3, 0, or I have 2, 0. Okay, so I have two x-intercepts for this function. Now let's look at the y-intercept. Okay, so here we set x equal to 0 and solve for y. So in my original equation, wherever I see an x, I'm going to replace that x with a 0. So I'm going to get y equals x squared is going to become 0 squared minus 5 times 0. And this will remain 6 because I don't have an x here. So it's a constant. Constants will not change, right? So that's going to be 6. So 0 squared is 0. 5 times 0 is also 0 plus 6, and that gives me 6. Okay, so my y-intercept is 6. If I write that in terms of a coordinate point, I'm going to get my y-intercept is going to be 0, 6.